So it happened. The United States government has now bombed Iran, and let's be entirely honest, a state of war now exists between the two countries. And I'm not being extreme in that statement in any way. I would reject any notion that this is just a simple, small conflict and this will not in any way become war. The United States has promised to continue bombing Iran until they give in to some vague notion of peace and unconditional surrender. There is no reasonable, logical way to say that one state bombing another relentlessly until they give in to the pressure and do whatever the first country wants isn't a state of war. Today, the Trump administration attacked 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, destroying them with bombs that only it has access to. These bunker buster bombs, which I went into more detail about in the previous video. And by doing so, the hope of the Americans was that crippling Iran's nuclear facilities and their ability to enrich uranium would force them to the negotiating table and show them that America was serious, which not only displays a disgustingly stupid amount of arrogance, but also a complete misunderstanding of how the Iranian regime would actually respond to this. We didn't even have to wait half a day to see what the initial Iranian reaction was going to be, because after Trump instituted this bombing and then demanded surrender from the Iranian regime, well, the Iranian regime responded by launching strikes on Israel. Despite the fact that Trump was making threats that if Iran did anything else, any other form of aggression, that he would escalate strikes, the United States would continue to attack Iran and bomb facilities across the country, the Iranians did not respond to that by backing down, but rather by escalating their war against Israel. And I'm not praising the character or the bravery of the Iranians by saying that. I just think it's insane to assume that they would just bend the knee. It's a theocratic Islamic regime led by an 86-year-old. Do you think that screams rational thinking? And look, that's led me to a pretty depressing interpretation, a possibility for what is actually happening when it comes to grand strategy here. Maybe the Israelis and the Americans knew that Iran would not back down. And Iran not backing down and continuing to launch strikes against Israel in response to this is the justification that they will use to just bomb Iran for the rest of Trump's term. And look, this all, I think, comes back to the fact that Iran is an enormous embarrassment for Trump's legacy. I mean, if we look at this, Obama, towards the end of his second term, was able to negotiate the Iran nuclear deal, which secured Western access, almost unmitigated, to Iran's nuclear sites to investigate constantly, and Iran in exchange would have all of its sanctions removed and be able to enrich uranium for civilian purposes. And that was lauded around the world, completely amongst the international community, as a great step towards peace between Iran and the Western world, and also ensuring that they couldn't develop a nuclear bomb. Trump in 2018, despite the objections of the international community and even his own advisors, tore up the Iran nuclear deal that Obama had negotiated. I think at least in part because it gave credit to his predecessor that he couldn't take, and that rubbed him the wrong way. So in this pursuit of satisfying his ego, he sold himself the idea that, oh, I can negotiate a better deal. But here's the thing, a dumb cunt like him has shown no ability to do that. To the surprise of nobody with an IQ over 7, after Trump tore up the Iran nuclear deal, what do you think the Iranians did? They pretty much immediately started enriching uranium far beyond what would ever be required just for civilian nuclear power generation. And who knows, maybe it was his intention, maybe he wanted this, maybe he wanted an on the brink of a nuclear bomb Iran so that he could point to it and fearmonger when it comes to foreign policy. But there is no way to deny that the reason that Iran is closer to a nuclear bomb now than it was before Trump took office is entirely his fault. This is like 4th grade level thinking, if even that. It's like a kid shitting themselves and then blaming the kid across the classroom for it and saying that it's unacceptable. Yeah, we know the situation is unacceptable, buddy. You're the one that created the situation. It's tricky because you have to assign one of two things to Trump in this situation. You either have to assign him outright malice and accept that he is a profoundly evil person and what he wants is regime change through war and destruction and a country to bomb, or you have to assign to him profound stupidity and an inability to understand the situation comparable to that of like a 7-year-old. And neither of those are particularly reasons to be optimistic about the state of the world at the moment. But you got to pick one. You got to assign this either to malice or incompetence. Because it looks like now the Iranian foreign minister has just spoken. He's currently in Turkey and he gave a press conference. And he has said that basically at this point, Iran does not see the United States as a viable negotiating partner at any point or in any way in the future. And I'm going to be entirely honest. I'm not trying to give credit to Iran, the Islamic Republic in any way, but like, who can blame them for taking that perspective now? From the Iranians' point of view, they were, as recently as 2 weeks ago, organizing talks and negotiations for a new nuclear deal with Trump. Trump then is aware of the fact that the Israelis are going to bomb them, does nothing, and then Trump himself gets involved and actively starts bombing someone who is supposed to be a negotiating partner. How do you make peace and negotiate with someone when if you don't make progress fast enough, they immediately start bombing you? But there's something deeper concerning me here, and that is that the big players in the world seem to have just broken away from the post-World War II established norm of diplomacy. And look, they've violated it before, but at the moment it's never been so visible and so consistent amongst all of them. This attack on Iran was undoubtedly a complete violation of international law. There was no pretext whatsoever for the United States to do this. You may think there was moral justification if you support this strike, but there was no legal justification for the United States to do this according to international law. And that is the argument that Iran is currently pitching to the rest of the world. And they have a very solid argument behind them that they were the victims of a completely illegal attack by the United States. And look, this is not a point of moral comparison that I'm trying to make here, but just looking at like international law, we also have the Russians who are on the United Nations Security Council currently conducting a completely illegal invasion of Ukraine. And if you are a non-aligned nation at the moment, you don't align yourself with the Russian bloc or the Western bloc, and you are trying to maintain some sort of like international neutrality, imagine looking at this situation and how obvious it is that the big players never have to follow the rules. Because it would feel like things had just gone backwards immensely. I mean, imagine that pitch of like, oh yeah, come join the international community. We have these established rules and such, but don't worry. If you're big enough and powerful enough, you can ignore them and you can kill as many people as you want without any repercussions. And look, maybe I'm being delusional and like, of course, there were always exceptions given to powerful countries, but to see it at the moment, just like so blatantly, with no attempt whatsoever to cover it up, this just destruction of international norms by powerful actors, it's so pathetically demoralizing. So I think, unfortunately, we're kind of in for a long one at this point. I don't see this conflict wrapping itself up easily or quickly. With the way that the Iranians are currently positioning themselves, talking about the honor of their state being desecrated, the way they have in the past, in the Iran-Iraq war, proved that they are willing to suffer hundreds of thousands of casualties to defend their country, I just do not see the Iranians rolling over. And on top of this, to put even more regional instability into the picture, apparently the Houthis have said that their ceasefire agreement is now null and void now that the United States has attacked Iran. So who knows, maybe international shipping will once again be completely ground to a halt. Who knows, maybe Iran in its response will also take part in blocking international trade through its waters, through the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe they will attack an American military base in Iraq on their border. We don't really know. The only two things that are kind of guaranteed to happen, to go up in response to this American attack because of all the instability it's going to cause, are gas prices going up and terrorism going up. So I think we're in for a long one. But I think if you want to call this a positive, it's a positive. But I think one of the positives that's come out of this saga is that the Republican Party has not changed in any capacity since George Bush. If you really get down to it, if we're being perfectly honest, some changes on tariffs, but at their core, the GOP is exactly what it was in 2003, and that is a party that stands for two things: massive tax cuts for the extremely wealthy at the expense of everybody else, and ridiculous, pointless, prolonged wars in the Middle East.